the agenda, we're going to talk about QB Power Hour. We'll talk about the host and guests, which, it'll just be me. I'm the only host for today. We'll talk about the CPE process, some announcements and updates like usual. And the topics we're going to cover, the learning objectives is, first, we'll talk about QuickBooks Accountant, batch enter. Then we'll talk about a little trick that I do to import the vendor list before I import my bank transactions. Then I'll talk about all sorts of conversions based on different file types that you may have. You may have PDF, you may have CSV, and the benefits of converting. Then I'll run through a comparison um, slide, a couple of slides where I'll talk about when I prefer batch enter, when I prefer bank feeds, and when I prefer direct data import. And then at the very end, I'll talk about importing bank transactions into, and yeah, that's misspelled. So transactions into QuickBooks Online with a import program called SetAccess. And if you were here on the December 17th top apps for the year, that may be a little bit of review of that, but I am going to cover a piece that I didn't cover, that Steve didn't cover on the demonstration. So about Michelle Long, the co-producer of QB Power Hour, she's not going to be with us today, but Michelle's going to run next week's webinar. It's going to be about converting QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online and different tips regarding doing that. I put in the chat window a link to download the slides. So you don't have to ask me if you're getting the slides or where can I get the slides. Just look in the chat window. It should be there. All right, let's go to the next slide here. So about myself, I'm an accountant. I live and work in Miami, Florida. I have my own accounting firm. I teach QuickBooks. And I really love QuickBooks. That's why I spend my time doing this. QB Power Hour, normally every 2 weeks. However, the next one's going to be next week, next Thursday. Michelle Long is going to cover converting QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, different tips and tricks and different issues that happen during that process. Normally we cover, oops, I went really far ahead. Normally cover advanced tips and insights on both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. And we're going to cover both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online topics today. There'll be a little bit more QuickBooks Desktop just because of the tools are available, but we are going to cover QuickBooks Online. We're not sponsored by Intuit. We're not paid for or vetted by Intuit. We're completely independent. Michelle and I run these webinars on our own. And everything we say, it's coming from our mouth, not Intuit's mouth. Anyway, CPE process. If you want your CPE, make sure you write down the CPE keyword. You must be logged in for at least 50 minutes. We're going to give you a CPE password somewhere in the middle of the webinar. And towards the end of the webinar, make sure you write it down and get it correct. Your CPE certificates will be emailed in about 3 weeks. I have not mailed the ones for last week. So we still have pending last week and obviously this week. Everything else should be mailed by now. The only upcoming event that we have announced, it's May 22nd, May 25th, scalingnewheights.com in the Bahamas. Strongly suggest that you look into that. Now, I want to make an announcement. For many, many years, I've helped other accounting firms convert the data, import data into QuickBooks. However, this year, we have formalized the service. So my firm now has a division called Data Entry US that's 100% focused on helping overwhelmed accounting firms that need help converting data or importing data into their client files. I'm not trying to sell you my services. I'm actually trying to tell you that this is what we do and this is where it's coming from. And in this webinar, I want to teach you everything that we do, that we charge for other accountants to do. So this is where this is coming from. Now, I want to make sure that if you have questions about importing data, about converting data, please use this email. So Hector at dataentryus.com. We have myself and my staff members that only do data entry and data conversion. Monitor that email because I get tons of emails about 1 million QuickBooks questions about a whole bunch of people. So if it's about data conversion, data importing, or data entry, send it to Hector at dataentryus.com. And I want to show you our new website real quick. It's dataentryus.com. I've actually compiled a lot of the resources and different videos that I have on data importing, So check out the website. We just launched it a couple weeks ago. I have several articles. I have one article called "Our Favorite Software for Converting Data," and I actually talk about every single software package that I use for conversion. It's got an explanation of each one, the why, the price. So I think it's a good data resource, and this is going to be. I want this to become the number one website in the world about data import, data conversion, and basically zero data entry. Anyway, so let's dive right into the content. First of all, step one, you got to get the transactions in Excel. Different banks have different ways of doing it. Bank of America, you have to click on a little download button and then choose to download in Excel instead of a Web Connect or a QBO file. And we're going to talk about going from Excel to QuickBooks first before we talk about bank feeds or anything like that. Right now, our focus, it's all about importing from Excel. So Excel or CSV only. So this is how the chase looks. You have to click on more choices on the right, then click on download activity, and then you have to click on download now and then select CSV file for import. And I can't have a screenshot for every single bank in America. That would be way too much. So I just picked the two biggest ones, Bank of America and Chase. So step one, get the transactions in Excel. Step two, or let's talk about why. So why download them in Excel instead of the bank feed? I'm a huge fan of bank feeds. However, there's situations where I want to go from Excel to QuickBooks, and I'll explain to you why. An Excel file or CSV file can be edited or manipulated, and we'll talk about that in detail in a second. QBO files or Web Connect files, they cannot, or you could, but it's really tedious. You have to convert them to Excel and then convert them back to .QBO. You can pre-fill the payee names, which is a great big deal for checks. What I do with my clients is when I download the Excel and I send my client just a list of checks and I have my client type in the payee and my client type in a memo, then I bring that back into my master import file. So when I import it back, whether I convert it to QBO for bank feeds or I copy and paste, I don't type any payee names in there. I let my client do that. And also, sometimes the banks allows you to go longer than 12 months or 90 days or whatever their natural limit is when you go to CSV. So sometimes the CSV file is really, really useful because you get more data or more transactions that are older than that. All right, so quick analysis: bank feeds versus batch enter versus direct import. This is probably one of the most common emails that I have when people will watch my videos or read my articles. They say, Hector, why are you doing a bank feed instead of direct import? Why are you using? So this is how I break it down. Bank feeds, it requires a .qbo file, right? So if you can get it from the bank, great, awesome. Now what happens is the payee gets renamed based on bank rules. So at the very beginning of bank feeds, like a one-time job, bank feeds is not as effective as it is over time. Over time, as you build more rules, that's where bank feeds become better. During tax season, I have a lot of clients that I don't do every year or I don't do every month. So maybe bank feeds is not the most effective way. And it takes two steps. You have to import them, then you have to create them and accept them. Now, the nice thing about bank feeds, it works with all versions of QuickBooks. Now, batch enter, one of my favorite tools in the world, the payee in the account can be directly entered. That means I don't have to rename it. It doesn't require two steps. It could be a single click. We'll do a demonstration of that. And direct import is very similar to batch enter in many ways. However, if you don't have QuickBooks Accountant Edition or Enterprise Edition, you only have Pro or Premier, then the only option you have is direct import. Same thing with QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online doesn't have a batch enter option. So if I need to do any sort of importing, I have to use a third-party tool to do direct import. So that's basically all three options in a nutshell. Now, when do I choose bank feeds over batch enter? So I choose bank feeds when the number of checks are low, when there's a lot of debit card transactions that have repeating vendors. That way the rules are easy to set up. When I've been using bank feeds before, obviously, like I mentioned, bank feeds get better over time, kind of like wine. Bank feeds get better over time because the rules start getting created and then things become more and more automated. And there are transactions in QuickBooks that I need to match. The problem is with batch enter, I cannot do any matching. So if there's something already in QuickBooks, that stuff is going to duplicate, unfortunately. So when do I choose batch enter over bank feeds? It's because I have check pay information in the spreadsheet, or I have deposit payee information in the spreadsheet, and I want to direct import those. And sometimes I want to do a full import without doing any accounting, any classifications, and then I run the classify tool to do that. So I'm also going to try to do an example of that. So that's when I think batch enter it's more powerful. And again, batch enter is only available in QuickBooks Accountant or Enterprise. Now, in what situations I would use direct import as my choice? Number one, as I mentioned before, QuickBooks Pro or Premier, only way to import is doing direct import, obviously, or bank feeds. If I'm working with Accountant Edition, but older than 2012, because Batch Enter started in 2013, and if I'm working with QuickBooks Online, like I said, for whatever reason, I don't want to work with bank feeds, and I want more of a Batch Enter style of import, then I would use opt-in for direct import. Okay, so that's kind of the last thing that we'll do. Now, before we jump into the demo, let me have the CPE keyword up here. CPE keyword is Toad. I'm going to leave it there for about a minute and see if there's any questions that I need to answer. Let's see. Okay, so the CPE keyword, Toad, write it down. So we have a question from Karen. If your client uses QuickBooks Pro, but you have QuickBooks Accountant, can you use bank feeds to enter them? Yeah, so bank feeds works on all versions of QuickBooks. Maybe your question is really, can you use batch enter? As long as your client gives you a copy of their file, you can batch enter stuff and then send it back to your client. That's totally okay, because you could always open yeah, so I guess somebody says, yes, okay, yes, so you meant batch enter, yes. So as long as your client gives you a copy of the file, you enter it and then you send it back to your client, then it will work. Then somebody says, Direct Connect or Web Connect, which one do you tell your clients to use? So remember, Direct Connect, it's with bank feeds, something that you have to pay for, and not all banks support it. And Web Connect is when you manually download the file to then upload it. So Lisa, I don't think I have a preference. It depends really on the situation. So I don't, whether it's Direct Connect or Web Connect, that's the same thing for me. All right, so last so I'm going to take the keyword out, write it down, Toad. All right, perfect. Let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so let's start doing some demos. So let me get out of here. Let me get into QuickBooks Accountant here, and then I'm going to open the Excel file. So the first things first. This is typically how a bank download looks when you bring it down from the bank. A couple of familiar things. We have a tab, a column here for type. We have date, description, amount, and transaction number or check number. Couple of very important things. One, I don't need this type. I don't need a column for type. I don't need to know if it's debit or credit. That is not useful for the import. That is not useful for the import. However, that may be useful for creating some filters. So let me show you something real quick. Before I can import using batch enter, I have to make sure I have two separate spreadsheets. I need to have one spreadsheet that only contains checks, right, and withdrawals, and then I have to have a separate spreadsheet, which I already separated here, that would have only deposits. So I have to actually take the original bank transactions. So let me pull up the original one that I have from the bank. I'm going to close that and close this. This is the original one I have from the bank that contains negatives and positives, and I have to separate into two separate spreadsheets. So the way I do it is I click on the data menu up here, and then I'll click on filter. And then what I can do is once I click on filter, I can do something simple like using my debit or credit column if I happen to have it, and use that as a catalyst for filtering them. So I could, uncheck these and only check check or debit or something like that, and then that would give me all of my debits or checks only. Or if I don't happen to have something like that, I can just click up here under amount. I can sort it by smallest to largest, and then I can just come down and select all the negatives first, and I can just copy them into into another spreadsheet here. So I can just select a new one and then hit here paste, and then I can go back here and then only select the ones that have the positives and bring those in, copy that into another sheet. And again, it's absolutely necessary that you have all the debits and all the credits as two different spreadsheets. Whoops. Okay, so let me bring in the headers up here as well and then show you what the next step is. So after I separate my debits and my credits, okay, I have to make sure that they're showing as positives in both sides. Now, in this case, the money coming in, it's already showing as positive, so I don't have to really mess with that. But the existing checks or the withdrawals, those are showing, let me make the font a little bit bigger here. Those are showing as negative. So to convert them from negative to positive, I'm just gonna hit equals negative of that number. Okay, or I can just do equals that number times -1, it's the same thing. So as long as I do that, I drag that down, so it copies all the way down. Now, really important, I have to copy those numbers, hit copy, and then paste over the current ones that are negative as values. That way, we don't have any more negatives in there. I can now delete this. I don't need that anymore. And now I have two sheets here, one for all the debits and then one for all the credits that are ready to be posted. Now, make sure that the date format is set up correctly. So I'm going to put here not accounting. Let me change to date format, right? And then when I want to paste this information, there is something that I do first. The first thing that I do, as I mentioned before, is I'm going to hit filter here again to show you what I do. And then I'm going to sort these by description. And then you see all these checks here. Now I'm only importing a month worth, but if I was doing a whole year's worth, which is really the point of what we are learning here, if we're doing a whole year's worth, this will be maybe 100 checks. So what I normally do is I take just this part here. I'll copy it and I'll create a new spreadsheet, paste that, right? And then I'll put some headers up here and I'll put here description, and I'll put here number, and I'll put here amount, and I'll put here date. And what I do is I send my client just this spreadsheet. And this is what I tell my client. I tell them, do me a favor. You're gonna write in all the pays in here because again, save my client money and time, whatever. You're gonna write all the pays here and then put the memo. So let's say my client goes back and puts all the pay information. Okay, so it puts Mary, Joseph, Jesus, whatever, and then it goes in and fills in all of the vendor names, and then they'll put in some memos in there. And sometimes whatever they want to put, I really don't care. Whatever they put is really what we end up importing. Now, this is not the category per se. This is just what they put, right? So let's say my client went in and filled all this information for me. So then after they do that, I take that spreadsheet they sent back to me and I copy that. I make sure it's in the same order that I left it in the first place. And then I come back and replace that. That way, when I'm importing it, whoops, let me just make sure that the memo goes out to the last part here, and I'll bring that back in there. I was supposed to add that memo towards the end, not in the middle. So after I add all my pay information that my client helped me input, and then I have all this memo, and I'm going to put memo here at the end, I'm ready to start importing. Now, before we start importing, something really important. This really long descriptions don't come in really well. They give you some errors when you use batch enter. So one of the things I do is I'll create a new column here, and then I'm going to show you a formula that I do to avoid bringing a lot of extra information. So what I do here is I hit equals, and then I'll select this formula called left, and inside left I'm going to put trim, because what trim does, it gets rid of extra spaces. So I'm selecting left, the trimmed version of that, comma 30, right? Because there's a maximum of 31 characters I can bring into the vendor's name. So I'm limiting it to 30. So that way it's only 30 just in case. And then I close parentheses. And then again, that was left, the trimmed version of whatever is in there, 30, and then I press enter. And then what happens is now I have cleaned up vendors that I could import that don't go over that limit. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. So that comes in, and that's basically going to bring in a much cleaner version of my vendor names. And then the other piece is I'm going to copy here and paste as values again. Okay, and then I'm gonna get rid of all columns, because you know in QuickBooks when you have a vendor name with a column, it tries to do a sub. So I'm gonna go to replace, find what I'm gonna replace, in this case a column with maybe a space, and then I'll click on replace all. That way if there's any columns in there, it doesn't give me any issues. Okay, there we go. So this is going to be the payee name. Now at this point, again, if you have a whole year's worth of data, you can maybe resort. You can resort these by name. So I can resort these by name. And what I can do is that if there are any vendors that have repeating names like this, like Costco, I can actually manually clean some of these up if I want to. So I'll just maybe just clean one up and drag that down. Now notice that this column, which is the original description, this one stays intact. That one I'm not gonna mess with. I'm gonna just mess with the payee, the one I'm gonna import. So like I said, optionally, you can clean these vendors up. If you don't want them to come in with a lot of extra information, it's up to you. I mean, that's up to you. I mean, I like to clean them up, but if you want to work really, really fast, then you don't have to. Again, see, if I want to clean them up, I can just clean them up like this. And if it may take you 20 minutes again, but when you import, it's extremely fast. So the next thing I do is I select all of my payee information here, and then I'm going to copy it. And before I import through batch enter, I'm going to use a tool called add edit multiple. So I'm going to go into, where are you? Accountant, no, sorry, lists. So list menu, add edit multiple, and I'm going to choose the drop down here, and I'll choose vendors. And what I'll do is I'll paste all these vendor names. Okay, that way I don't have to create them as I do the paste, which is pretty awesome, because when I do the paste, all the vendor names are already in there, and I don't get any errors about re-entering those. So I'm going to hit save changes. That's going to create all of my vendors first. If they're already on the list, you know, they'll tell you that it's repeated. However, everything else that I pasted was created. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now comes the moment of magic. I'm going to go into accountant, batch enter transactions, and I have to make sure that all these columns match my spreadsheet. So my spreadsheet has date, description, payee, amount, check number, and memo. So date, description, payee, amount, check number, and memo. So I'm going to click on customize here, and it's going to be date. Then it's going to be description, which is a memo. Then we're going to have payee, and I always forget what these are. So date, description, payee, amount, check, memo. So then we're going to do amount. There we go. And then check number is going to be the reference number. The heck is my reference number? Okay, my reference number. And then the last one is going to be memo. Wait, no, not memo. Oh, I have another memo. Okay, so what I can do is let me just replace for the checks themselves, and something that I before I resorted that, I needed to make sure that this memo gets replaced with this. I forgot about that. I was supposed to do that first. Yeah, there you go. So I was supposed to put my client's memo back into that description area. So when I paste it, it's part of the description as well. Yeah, so that's something I forgot to do. Okay, so I think I'm good to go here. Number, okay, and then I'll get rid of item here. And then account is blank, and I'll kind of tell you what we're going to do account in a second. Okay, so now my spreadsheet is set up. So I'm going to go ahead and select all the data that I'm going to import. I'll select the entire spreadsheet. This could be hundreds of thousands of transactions, right? And then I'm going to come here to QuickBooks, and then I'm going to right click here on the top right box and hit paste. And basically all the information is going to come in. I got to make sure that the pay information, if for whatever reason, if it's not added, we can add it in there. Just remember that when I cleaned up some of these vendors, I hit undo right after I cleaned them up. So I'm just going to go down the reds by just keep clicking on the right arrow and press enter. So I just do I do down arrow, enter, and basically that starts clearing up all the vendor names that are red, which is required for it to move forward and do the import. So as long as I have no other vendors in red, I'm good to go. And one of the really important things is, although I cleaned up some of the payee information, my original bank description is intact, which is extremely useful in my opinion. All right, so the next step is you have two choices, I think. One of the choices is to actually go to account and go to each category and type it manually, right? So that's one of my choices, and I'll show you my preferred choice, but you can do this. So you could certainly do this. Go down and select each option. What I do, and I'll kind of show you what I do. What I do is I'll put everything into like uncategorized expense first, okay? And I'm gonna show you, this is a really neat trick. I'm gonna put everything under uncategorized expense. So I'll just select the first one, copy down. I'm gonna put everything under uncategorized expense. I'll hit save transactions, because really what I'm trying to focus in is bringing the data into QuickBooks first. I'm gonna deal with categorizing later. Same thing with deposits. I'm gonna come in here and switch transaction type to deposits. And then let me go back into my spreadsheet. Now let me go into my deposit side. Remember what I have to do. I create a new column here, and then I have to do equals left, and I have to trim my current description. And then after my current description is trimmed, I'm only going to bring the first 30 characters, close parentheses. Okay, so that brings the first 30 characters of my payee info. Okay, and then I'm going to copy this information and paste values. And then I'm going to click on find, replace a column with nothing. Again, because columns work really strange. Okay, and then I'll click on replace all. Perfect. So then I have no column. Cool. All right. So now that I have all my my payee names on the deposit side cleaned up, again, I have the choice. I can sit there and clean them up if I want to, but I'm just going to copy this, go back into QuickBooks. Remember that trick? We go to list, add, edit multiple list entries. We go into vendors, and again, I also bring in the payees that for the money coming in. I bring it in as vendors as well. Again, I don't really spend too much time trying to make it one customer one, but I bring everything vendor. It doesn't matter. So after I bring in all my payees, I'll close that. And again, we're trying to reduce the amount of like red warnings that we get when we do the import. Okay, so what does this look like? We have date. Okay, we have to make sure that our date is also on the right formatting. And something I forgot to mention, in this amount here, make sure that there's no dollar signs, right? No currency. It can't, dollar signs, it just goes haywire. So no dollar signs on this column. Okay, so we have date, description, payee, amount, and transaction number. Okay, let's see if I remember how to do this thing. So date, then we have description, so that would be memo. Then we have payee, which will be received from. Then we have, I believe it's amount, and then check number, and then account from, that would be my category that always goes all the way at the end. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. I think I should be able to select this whole thing here and copy it back into QuickBooks, right click on the top right, paste, there we go. Make sure that we clear out those reds. Perfect. And again, they have to be positives in both sides. And then, as I mentioned before, we can sit there and categorize these to the right income category if I want to. But as I mentioned before, I just put them into one uncategorized income, and then right click, copy down. And we'll talk about in a second why I put them all into uncategorized income. Okay, so I'm going to go save transactions, hit yes. So I brought in all my deposits and all my checks. Then the next thing I'm going to do is reconcile my bank. So this comes from, I believe it was this statement. Okay, so I got my beginning balance already in there. I'm just going to put my ending balance here from my bank statement, 48,519.12. So let me go into banking, reconcile, and then I'll put 12/31/2015, paste my ending balance. hit continue, and then in theory, right, let's cross our fingers, I should hit mark all, and the difference should be 0. Okay, and that's really what it's meant to do. It's just meant to bring all the transactions in raw. I'm not really too concerned about the specific categories for now. I'm just trying to reconcile. So imagine if we did that. I just did it in what, 20 minutes. We did that for a whole year's worth. It may take another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes to do a little bit more data. It doesn't take that much longer. Then we hit reconcile now. My banks are fully reconciled. So at least I got all the data in there. That's kind of like the first trick there. Now, what happens is if I go pull a profit and loss, I basically just have uh, uncategorized income, uncategorized expense. Again, we forced it by just putting those generic income accounts and expense accounts. However, because QuickBooks Accountant has the batch enter tool, which I'm going to click on Accountant, client data review, the reclassify transactions tool. I'll go to reclassify transactions, and then very easy, I can go into my expense categories, select all these categories here, and then what I do in this case is I sort these by name, okay, and then I categorize these basically in batch. So I look at my 7-Eleven, I look at my Best Buy, I select all my Costco's, and here my custom framing, and that's all gonna be office supplies. And then I click reclassify, do all those in one shot. Okay, and then when you have common vendors, that becomes easier. Then I have BMW Financial, I put that into automobile expense, and then take a look at all these here that say Intuit payment fee. And I can even filter these. So if I wanted to just narrow down one specific one, like this one, it can just narrow that down, hit select all, and then I'll put that into my bank service charges, and you get the point. And I just start reclassifying, and basically I start shaping up my P&L as I go. And I believe this is just faster than doing one by one in uh, in the batch enter, but you could use it. But now what's cool about it is because the memo is intact, and even if I truncated it, I can see the memo. And if I look at what my client put in some of these categories, assuming the client, knows what they're doing on their memos, then maybe I can, take what my client put in their memo and I know what to do with it, right? So then I can just select, I can sort these by memo also and see whatever, because sometimes my client will categorize things correctly. So contractor, I can create the account here on the fly, and then recategorize all those. And then if I got transfers, that same thing, right? So I got all these transfers to maybe like a personal account of some sort, and I can just put this into some equity account, right? I probably have a distribution account here somewhere, a dividend paid, whatever, reclassify. So that's kind of the trick of using this system. And like I said, I think it's much faster than doing it by hand. And also, bank feeds could help do this, but honestly, in my experience, when I'm hired to do a lot of data entry like this, I I do this technique because this technique I think is just much faster. And I love data entry. It's a bread and butter. It's a one area where people that most accountants hate. Our firm loves to do it, and we know all the techniques of doing that. Okay, so that's batch enter for checks and deposits. For credit card charges, the only thing I want to say that's different is if I was to do the same technique for credit card charges, for credit cards in particular, I don't have to split, like deposits and checks. So I can bring in negatives and positives. So make sure that you know that a credit card charge should show up as a positive, and a credit card credit or a payment to the credit card or a refund to the credit card, that should show up as negative. So when I download my credit card charges, which I should kind of show you what that is, I actually flipped the categories and put the charges as positives and the payments as negative. So some banks bring it like this. Some bank requires you to convert it, and I used all the same techniques. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and close that. That's as much I wanted to cover about that. Let's talk about the next topic. And we do have some questions here. Okay. So the next topic is Hector's toolkit. So I wanted to tell you my toolkit, which is what I use during tax time to do all my work, is obviously number one, most important in my toolkit, QuickBooks Accountant Edition. I just showed you Batch Enter. Batch Enter is awesome, it's amazing, only works in Accountant Edition. And obviously the combination between Batch Enter and reclassified transactions is really deadly. The second tool in my toolkit, the one I use the most, is called 2QBO Convert Pro. Again, if you've seen multiple webinars of QB Power Hour, you heard me talk about this tool numerous times because I can convert files depending on the type, and I'll kind of show you examples of different files I can convert. And the third one is called Set Access, which allows me to do direct import, and I'm actually going to do an example of Set Access into QuickBooks Online. Okay. Now, for importing list or price lists, I actually like PDF to Excel. PDF to Excel is awesome for a PDF file, but not for bank statements. So if I have to import anything but bank statements, I import customers' names, vendor names that are in a PDF, in a scanned document, I'll use PDF to Excel. But if it's a bank statement, I use 2QBO Convert Pro to convert to bank feeds, or I use ScanWriter. Now, ScanWriter, I use both ScanWriter and 2QBO, and people always tell me, should I do this or should I do that? It depends on what you're trying to do. Because ScanWriter can do direct import into QuickBooks, and 2QBO Convert Pro cannot do direct import. It converts it to a Web Connect file. You still have to do the bank feeds. And then if I have to go from a QuickBooks file to another, I use one called Data Transfer Utility by 2Q2Q.us. And if I have to create an IIF file for whatever reason, very typical for converting timesheets that are in Excel into importable format, I can use Transaction Creator, or I can also use Set Access, which is pretty much like a Swiss Army knife of importing. Okay, so let me show you real quick this tool. Again, like I said, we've talked about this tool before in QB Power Hour, but I wanted to explore a little bit more detail about all the things it can do. 2QBO Convert Pro is one of my favorite tools because it can go from a PDF bank statement to CSV. And now you know the power of importing CSV into QuickBooks with bank feeds. It can go from CSV to .QBO. So if you have a bank that doesn't export Web Connect files or QBO files, exports in CSV, what you can do is you can clean them up the way I showed you how to do it, and add those payee names, and then convert it to QBO, and then use bank feeds. And one thing I really like about it is I can take QBO files, convert them to CSV. So if my bank exports Web Connect, but I don't like the way the data comes in because the data comes in bad, I can export it to CSV. I can modify some of the data and then copy it from CSV back to QBO. And I can go from PDF directly to QBO. And if my bank only downloads the Quicken files, the QIF files like PayPal doesn't do QBOs, I can download the QIF and convert that either to CSV that I can manipulate in Excel or go straight to QBO. So let me hit escape here for a second and show you the way that tool works real quick. So the way this tool works is a very fundamental. So it's a standalone tool. It doesn't attach itself to QuickBooks in any way. It can convert to .QBO, which can be imported either Excel or to QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop. So let me just show you real quick. Let's say I have a bank statement here. And show you I have this bank statement here I downloaded from the bank. Let's say for whatever reason I don't have access to the QBO files anymore, but I only have access to the PDF. That happens. Sometimes clients are stubborn or whatever, but or sometimes for whatever reason this is the only thing I have available. So digital PDF works best. If you have to scan it, scan works pretty good. But the software costs a little bit more, the one that can do the scanning. But the digital PDF, you can get away with the core version of the software if you have the digital PDF. So how this works is I'll run the program here. First, I'll click on settings, and then I have to tell it what bank it is. So I go to action type, I tell it, look, this is a bank or this is a credit card. I go to QuickBooks FID, I click lookup, and then let's say this is a Chase, so I search Chase in there and then I select it. This has to do with how QuickBooks Desktop sees the file importing or how QuickBooks Online sees the file importing. Back routing number you don't need to put, but the account number make sure you do put that to avoid any confusion. So you put the account number there, and then you hit OK, and then you click on convert. I'm gonna go find this file here in the desktop. Where is it? Statements. Then I'll pick the file, and then I have two options. I can do a preview so I can see what it's going to look like before it converts, or I can just go straight to CSV, which is pretty good, again, because I can make some changes in Excel and then use that CSV to import through batch enter, or maybe I would just convert it to QBO so I can do it through bank feeds, depending on your preference. So I'm going to click on preview here to show you, and basically this will read the PDF. If it's digital, it'll read it super fast. If it's scanned, it'll take a little bit longer to recognize the characters. And this tells you, look, this the date came in as date, the payee came as a payee amount, and this is where I can just make sure and double check that all the columns make sense. Up here, there's a quick reconciliation that tells you the starting balance, the ending balance, the totals, just for you to double check that the data is complete. So I really like that I can just kind of preview that before I convert the file. And then at this point, I can do save as CSV, and I'll just show you that real quick. I'll save as a CSV, which I can open, and then I get basically the same thing that I showed you originally that I had downloaded directly from the bank. And then you can rewind this video and watch it again to see the process for that. Or I can just from here just do, instead of converting it to, hit preview again. So instead of converting it to CSV, I'll just convert it to .qbo, which will just be a regular, bank feed import, right? Where I can just convert to QBO, which I can, instead of using batch enter, just go into my QuickBooks desktop or online, go to utilities, import web connect files, and then hit desktop, look for my file where it says statements, select it, and then just bring it in through bank feeds. And I'm not gonna really spend any time talking about bank feeds. And remember, this is the area where it reads the account number. That's why that's important. So that is kind of the point of using that tool. It could be, again, it could be because I want to convert to CSV, because as CSV I want to import through batch enter, or maybe I want to convert to CSV because I want to manipulate it, add the payees for the checks, and then once that's done, convert that to QBO, or I want to go straight from PDF to QBO. So it's a really neat multi-use tool that can do a bunch of stuff, but this tool does not do direct import. This tool only converts the file for you to choose whether it's going to be a direct import or a bank feeds. So to QBO Convert Pro doesn't import anything. It just converts the files for you to be able to bring them in. So check out their website. It's 2QBO.com. Very easy. They streamlined the domain name. That goes straight to it. That tool is $249. All right. The last one I want to show you is Z-Axis. Z-Axis is like the Swiss Army knife of import. You can do a lot more than bank feeds. The bank transactions. You can import invoices, open balances, journal entries, timesheets. It could do a lot. I mean, there's the most popular tool out there that does this is called Transaction Pro Importer. Transaction Pro Importer is the most widely used and most popular tool, and this is a direct competitor of Z-Axis. Why I chose Z-Axis instead of Transaction Pro Importer, and mind you, I love Transaction Pro Importer. I use that tool too. But why I like Z-Axis in particular is because the one tool can do both import into desktop and QuickBooks Online. It can do both. So I think it's really powerful that with one tool I can import to both QuickBooks types. And it can also do POS, by the way, so it's kind of cool. But it can import into QuickBooks Online without me having to pay per company per month. It's just one-time fee. I buy the software and it does that. So let me show you how that works. So first of all, let me open my QuickBooks Online here to show you what I mean. So here's my QuickBooks Online, and I'm showing you it's got a blank register. It only has the beginning balances. So I'm going to run Z-Axis here, and basically the process is I choose here if I want to connect it to QuickBooks Desktop, if I want to connect it to QuickBooks Online, or POS. So once you click QuickBooks Online, it'll basically ask you for your username and password, and you choose the file, and then here will tell you that it's connected. So if it says disconnect here, that means it's connected. So to import, kind of the same system that I have to use with QuickBooks Desktop, where I have to do deposits only and then checks only, it works the same way here. So I'm going to browse. I'm going to look for my spreadsheet that has my deposits only. I'll hit open, and that's the same spreadsheet that I used on the earlier example. Choose mapping. This is the most important piece. I have to do the mapping. I actually have to tell it. There's no copy and pasting in QuickBooks Online, and there's no organizing the columns so they look the same. Obviously, batch enter is just much easier, but with QuickBooks Online you have to do mapping. So I'm gonna go to edit here and show you how that works. Basically, I'm gonna say, okay, I have 5 columns. I have date, description, payee, and amount. I have 4 columns. So I'm going to tell it, look, date is transaction date. Description is description. Line amount is line amount. Payee. So I have to match all this up. Now, what I love about this is they have a cheat sheet. So if you actually Google, I'm going to Google ZAccess import deposits QuickBooks Online, and it'll take you straight into their website. And you'll see in their website, they have a cheat sheet. And I'll show you. They have a cheat sheet that looks like this, that shows you every single transaction that it can import to, and it gives you in reds what their mappings are called. So that way you can visually see what you're importing and where is it going in the transaction. So now you know, based on these red characters, you know what all these fields mean so that you can match your spreadsheets to work like that. So I'm just going to click on save here, and then once I have all my mapping set up, I'm going to click on import, and then basically it's going to import every one of my transactions. And this, it'll validate first to make sure that there's no errors or extra data. If it tells you the description is too long, just click on ignore all, and the system will automatically shorten the description if it needs to. And it takes about 3 seconds per transaction. So if you're doing 1,000 transactions, that's 3,000 seconds to do your math there. Okay, so at this point, I just go have some coffee and come back. But as this goes, I can actually go into QuickBooks Online here, and I'm gonna hit refresh, so you can actually start seeing how these transactions start coming in here automatically. So as this refreshes, let me check my questions here. There's a lot of questions. So somebody says, 2QBO convert is good, but they don't have really good support. It's only email. True. Okay, that's the one thing. One criticism about 2QBO is that they don't have phone support. I know the owner personally of this company. We've talked about it. We've done some numbers. Apparently, the cost of the software would have to almost double to do phone support. So in order to keep the cost low, they decided to only do email support. But once you learn it, it's pretty much easy. Somebody says, what's the cost of that, of ZAccess? Yeah, ZAccess is $195 for the import. But for 2QBO, that's $249. Somebody says, this is easy for you, Hector, not so easy for me. That's funny. Okay, somebody says, using 2QBO, bank statement to CSV, files to QBO, how can I go about doing this? So just go to 2QBO.com to download that software. But what's the best way to get Excel payroll that's in Excel and import it from a third party? So I would say, if you have a payroll in Excel, ZAccess is the best choice, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm using ZAccess just for deposits right now, but I can also import journal entries to ZAccess. Okay, somebody says, can you give the transaction creator again? I'm not sure what you meant by that. Watch the recording, maybe you'll figure it out. And then it says there's 2 versions of 2QBO. Let me go to 2QBO.com. That's an area. Again, I wanted to concentrate on ZAccess now, but a lot of people have questions about this. You go to 2QBO.com, it's going to give you 2 options for the software. One is $249, which is the one that can import digital PDFs. And then if you scroll down somewhere around here, it gives you an option for the one that has the plus, which is $299. The one that has the plus, it's a little bit more expensive. That one can do scanned statements. So if you don't have digital PDF and you have scanned statements, though that's a little bit more expensive for the software. So that's your answer about that. Somebody says, what about when some of the transactions were payments or partial payments? Okay, so if you import the data, you really can't deal with payments or partial payments, you're just going straight to deposit or straight to check. Somebody has an unrelated question. Okay, I want to answer that. Does 2QBO work with QuickBooks Desktop? Yes, 2QBO converts to Web Connect, which is basically something that you can import in desktop or online. Now, people keep asking me about the wrong one. They're the same. Okay, also, do you cover making bank rules? No, I won't cover making bank rules because we're almost out of time. And there is, I've done other webinars about bank feeds. So just Google Hector Garcia bank feeds and you'll find something like that. Somebody says, does Z-Access import into the desktop? Yes, Z-Access imports into desktop and online. The example I'm doing right now is just for the online. Okay, let me now import the checks. So I'm going to click on browse and then I'm going to click on checks here and then hit open and then choose my mapping that I already have set up. Again, the same style here. I have to make sure that all my columns match with my spreadsheet. And then I'll hit OK, and then I'll click import. So now I'm importing all of my checks. Again, if the description is too long, just click on ignore all. It will take it. While that imports, let's see what else we have. Somebody says, is it $249 an annual fee or a single charge? Okay, again, for Z-Access, which is the one you're looking at right now, it's a single charge of $195. You will never pay another fee again unless they upgrade to a new version or something like that, and then I'm sure there's an upgrade in the future. For 2QBO, which is this one, the core product, the one that's $249, it's a one-time fee and that's it. And for the Plus product, you're going to pay an annual fee of $99 to have that additional support on the scanned statements. For the first year, it's only $50. That's why you only pay an extra $50 for the Plus. Let's see. Let me see. I'm not sure. Somebody says, can you go slower? Well, too late. Somebody says, does Z-Access work with Xero? Xero is that other software that we don't talk about here. So I actually don't know. I can't answer that. Wish I could. Let me see. Let me just double check. I think it does. Let me just, I'll check real quick when this is done importing. I'll check if it works with Xero. I think it does work with Xero. Let's see what else. I don't know if we have any other questions here. Oh, can Z-Access convert IFF files to QBO? Yes, that's another cool feature that this program has. Z-Access, you can import IIFs into QuickBooks Online. It's actually the only way. Somebody says, which one's better? 2QBO or Z-Access? They're not better. They're just different. I mean, I'm trying to show you how they're significantly different, right? Because again, 2QBO doesn't import anything. 2QBO just converts the files. Let's see. Somebody. There's a lot of questions here. I don't think I'll be able to cover them all. So, are journal entries imported to the same 4 columns? No. It could do. I think it's like 4 or 5 columns that you can import in a journal entry. Let me see. Okay, so how can I do this with a Mac version? Okay, Z-Access, the one you're looking at, cannot import into the Mac version. There is a similar batch enter tool in the Mac version, but this cannot import into the Mac version. All right, I have a lot of questions. I don't think I can answer them all. I'm just gonna go ahead and run the polling question for the people that have to leave at the top of the hour. This is done as soon as the polling question is up. I'm going to go ahead and just show you kind of what this looks like in QBO when it's finished. So I'm launching the polling question for the people that have to go in the next couple of minutes. Go ahead and answer that, please. So for your CPE, go ahead and answer the polling question. Okay. See what other questions we have here. Does Z-Access work in the Canadian version of QuickBooks? Not 100% sure. I'm going to say yes, but email them. Check out their website first. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Let's see what else we have. Does 2QBO work in the Canadian version of QuickBooks? Yes, because it's just bank feeds import. Okay. Okay, what are the questions I have here? Okay, so Z-Access has an export version. What does that do? So the export version of Z-Access can export transactions, which is really useful to go from one QuickBooks file to the next. And the export can also do deleting. So the export version, which is a little bit more, can also do deleting. All right. Okay, let me go ahead and close the polling question. So I'm going to leave it up for another 30 seconds and close that polling question. That was basically, in a nutshell, how the process worked. And so stay tuned next week. Thank you very much for coming to the webinar. Stay tuned next week for Michelle's webinar, which is going to be about converting QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. If you have any questions, go ahead and email me to Hector at dataentryus.com. Questions about data entry, again, only use Hector at dataentryus.com, because that's the only email that we're monitoring regarding those questions. And then we're pretty much done. Thank you very much for coming. I'll see you guys next week.